Nobody likes making fun of tough guy wannabe military gamers more than me. But I'm going to have to eat my words, especially as Ukrainian gamers have become the heroes of the war in Ukraine. Just how are Call of Duty nerds becoming the premier soldiers in Ukraine's fight against Russian aggression? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's find out. Okay, so this is an interesting sort of compilation of stories, and it's something that we've actually seen for a while now. This is one story, actually from a Korean newspaper, saying a student who was treated as a nerd for focusing only on his games and dropping out of school is now an elite drone pilot who's taken out Russian troops, right? They actually cite the Wall Street Journal profile of Alexander Darkno, who recently became an FPV drone pilot, taking out Russian military targets, right? He actually reports that he's taken out up to 300 Russian troops in the last 18 months, which makes him, as they point out, twice as dangerous as U.S. Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle, right? Now, they point out that the battlefield is less about, well, they say the battlefield's less about elite soldiers. I don't think that's quite accurate, right? So what you have instead is this sort of, what's the word I want? Like a cultural norm, right? And in the battlefield, you have definitely still a role for elite soldiers. If you're a member of combatvetnews.com, you guys know that over on that site, this is where it's my Patreon, essentially. It's where I do all the videos that I can't put on YouTube, primarily combat footage. And we've been taking a look actually at the Chosen Company. This is of the International Legion. They're particularly some of their assault operations on Russian trenches. And it's clear from that frontline infantry still have a huge role to play in the modern battlefield. But they can't succeed without the drone pilots, and the drone pilots can't succeed without infantry. So, if there's one thing you should take away from this, it's a little bit, military operations look like any other workplace, right? You just can't do everything by yourself. You've got to be part of a team. And what's interesting is that the majority of members of drone units are not actually in the military. So they don't have military culture like formal command or uniforms, right? It's also safe to work from a relatively far distance, unlike troops who are directly deployed to the battlefield. Again, if you followed Civdiv, another creator, you see that he has actually been operating in a drone team with foreign volunteers. And while he is a long way from the direct combat, the direct infantry, light infantry combat that we have seen, he is absolutely in combat, taking fire in a bunker. And what's fascinating is I want to point out here his compatriot. This is someone who, in the interview, you should absolutely watch it. In this interview, the fellow drone pilot here is a total absolute gamer. And he says, he's like, I'm an IT guy. He's like, I have no military experience. I'm not a soldier. But he was in that bunker flying drones against Russians. And that bunker was taking artillery. It was taking mortar fire. So there is to sit there and say, okay, infantry assumes the risk. Drone pilots assume zero risk. Not true, right? The Russians have their own drone pilots, and boy, they definitely are on the hunt for Ukrainian drone pilots. So, the Wall Street Journal, right, also mentioning, as we've talked about here, that the appeal of drones for Ukrainian forces are primarily that the drones give them what in military parlance we call standoff distance. And standoff distance is this idea that you can touch the enemy before they can touch you. And if you're a Russian soldier, you have to cover often great distances to get to your target, right? To get to those Ukrainian trenches. And in the process, the idea is that you're detected and then eliminated by Ukrainian drones and artillery, and that by the time you actually arrive at the Ukrainian trench positions, your attack has been greatly diminished in effectiveness, if not defeated entirely. That's one of the reasons why Russia loves to pat itself on the back and say, guys, we've been making spectacular gains, seizing just acres and acres of empty farmland and tiny farming villages. But the Ukrainians, in turn, right, you can see we're working backwards through time here. And you could see that, yeah, Russian forces do make some advances through these fields, but you can literally watch the fact that it's clear what's happening. The Ukrainian strategy is to bait the Russians to come across these open fields where they get pieced up, because you can watch as the Ukrainians move from defensive line to defensive line, right? You can see literally as they leapfrog across this river, right? And this casualty data bears out that this strategy is working. Again, the Russians are incurring massive casualties in order to seize relatively low value terrain. And when it really counts in areas like Pokrovsk and Toretsk, the Ukrainians are able to hold the Russians back, but only when it's a priority. So, and this is all possible because of a drone-centric strategy. Now, what's pretty fascinating is that there's actually now MOD-certified drone schools where drone pilots can train in order to become effective enough to take out Russian drones, right? And it profiles the fact that while some of these, for example, they point out 2 of these drone school cadets are infantry troops who are essentially been assigned to their units to get trained up on being drone pilots. A lot of them are also like a 15-year-old, right, who is a Ukrainian Turk. And while he acknowledges he won't be eligible for conscription for another 10 years, he still wants to go through the course to become more proficient in drones, right, and compete with other drone flying cadets, right? Other cadets who aren't eligible for conscription want to pass on their own knowledge about how to operate these drones. So it's very interesting to see kind of the evolution of drone warfare and these cutting-edge drone pilots. Truly a really fascinating kind of strategy for Ukraine, and one that appears to be paying considerable dividends when you look at the casualty numbers. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Huge thank you to our Colonel tier members like Martin Baum, Chris Rossi, Stuart Abel, Daniel Brown, Sergey Zinchenko, Chris Holmes, Chris Gorsuch, Daniel M., Ida Skycall, as well as our Lieutenant tier members. Couldn't do it without you guys. I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers.